For as long as I knew her, my wife has always been a weak, sickly person. But she was such a wonderful and beautiful person that I didn't let that stop me from marrying her. It was about a year into our newlywed life that things took a turn for the worse. She would be stuck in bed more often than not, and begin having coughing fits that wouldn't end until she passed out. I was beside myself, not knowing what to do. I took her to every doctor and specialist just to figure out what was wrong with her. It didn't work. They didn't know, and I had no clue what to do. So I did my best to take care of her, and because that was all I could do. Until one night I was making her a stew. I cut myself. When I went into the room with it, I found her in the middle of a coughing fit. I did my best to comfort and soothe her, thinking the soup would help when nothing else ever did. I fed her a spoonful of the liquid. Amazingly, the sip she managed to swallow down decreased the intensity of the cough. I fed her a second and third helping of the stew, and the fit just subsided. It was practically a miracle. After I finished feeding her and made sure she was comfortable in her bed, I went to work on figuring out what made the soups so special. I made it for her dozens of times before, and it's never had that effect. It was when I was back in the kitchen, seeing if I used any ingredients than normal, that I noticed the blood trickling from my finger. Despite my doubts about the blood being a magical ingredient, I spent the next week experimenting with it. I didn't even need the whole week to get my results, but I continued to make sure I was right. The meals and drinks I dosed with my blood made her feel better, while the other stuff did what it always did. Nothing. So after that week, I began putting my blood in everything I served her. She was doing marvelously well, but I wasn't. Draining blood every day was starting to wear on me. That's when I decided to experiment again. I bought various animals to see if their blood helped her. I went through goldfish to dog to see if their blood would help. Alas, I came to the conclusion that only human blood would help my wife. That's when I decided I would rob a blood drive. The first heist went well, but I only got a couple pints out of it. So I pulled off a second one, and that's when things went wrong. I don't know if the guy was trying to be a hero. After all, it was just blood. But maybe that was his logic too, that I wouldn't shoot someone over just blood. But I did, and he is no longer with the living. Killing two birds with one stone, I took the blood along with his body. I stored them both in the basement, the blood in a mini fridge and his body in a large freezer next to it. Over the next week, I agonized over what to do with the body, when I had a weird thought. The night after that thought, I served my wife a meat that she said was the best thing I have ever cooked her. Miraculously enough, she was feeling so well the next day that she wanted to go on a date. We spent a blissful month like that until the meat was gone from the freezer. Then it was back to bed rest and coughing for her. Luckily, I still had a bit of blood to help her out with that. But would just going back to status quo be fine after such a wonderful month? I didn't think so. So I began to think. I had two options, either steal a body or make one. After much thought on the subject, I decided on the easier option. There was a drug dealer in the neighborhood. He hung out at the local park most nights. I staked it out for 3 nights before I found him. I waited in the bushes and trees for over 4 hours before he was alone. I struck then. Not wanting the sound of the gunshot or the spillage of the blood, I slipped in behind him and suffocated him with a bag over his head. From there, it was easy to drag him to the trunk of my car and drive him on home. The next night, I cooked my wife a meal that surpassed all others due to the freshness of the ingredients. I knew the ingredients wouldn't last forever, so I was already beginning to think about where my wife's next meal would be coming from.